just had to face it. I obviously can't do this job anymore. It must be stress. It must be burnout. Perhaps I'm having a nervous breakdown. I need to take a break or else my husband's going to leave me and I'm going to get fired. I have to do something. I had to take whatever little bit of agency I had and do something to say, okay, I have some control over this. This is not going to control me. And the best thing I could come up with was to quit and then make the lifestyle changes to support that and give myself some space to figure out what was going on.
Welcome to A Beautiful Fix. I'm Tracy Hill. Each week we'll dive into the latest thought gem, recharging and reconnecting with what lights you up and makes you feel alive. Let's discover your next beautiful fix together. Hey, real quick before we dive in, you're powerful. And sometimes you just need someone to remind you what's already in you. That's what human design does. It's the difference between guessing and knowing. So you can stop searching outside yourself and start trusting the answers within. I promise you they're there. Grab your free chart at abeautifulfix.com, and when you're ready to go deeper, book a one-to-one session with me. All right, let's get into the episode. Today's guest is Dr. Susan Miele, writer, speaker, leadership expert, and author of Paused, Redefining Identity When Our Story No Longer Holds Us. After spending more than 3 decades helping leaders and organizations navigate change, Susan unexpectedly found herself facing a profound transition of her own. After losing her career, her health, and her home in less than a year, Susan found herself facing a question many of us eventually encounter. Who am I when the story I've built my life around no longer fits? Rather than rushing to reinvent herself, Susan chose something much harder. She allowed herself to pause. That experience became the foundation for her book, Paused, where she blends her lived experience with identity theory and human development to help others navigate life's unexpected transitions with greater compassion, courage, and clarity. Susan is also a 5/1 splenic projector in human design. Projectors are often gifted at seeing people and systems in ways others can't, and they're designed to wait for the right invitations rather than forcing opportunities. Susan, welcome to A Beautiful Fix.
Thank you so much, Tracy. It's great to be here.
It's so wonderful to have you here, and there's so many parallels between our stories. I'm just really excited to dig in here because when I left my corporate career suddenly, just kind of took a leap of faith, I allowed myself to pause. I didn't call it a pause, but I just allowed myself to just be for the first time in my life. I knew that rushing back into something or trying to solution it too early was going to lead me back to the same kind of situation. So I'm really interested to dig into this. But before we go there, just tell us a little bit about the woman you were before everything changed. Like, how would you have described your identity at that point in your life?
My identity and my job were really one and the same. So it was very much, I wore my identity, my professional identity, as if it was who I was what I did. So my job and I were very interchangeable. There was very little light between it. And while I had many other roles that I played in life, my identity had become really solidly about the role I had as a chief people officer. At that point, it was going on 20 years in human resources, and I had reached the C-suite before 40, which was my goal, was to be in the C-suite as a chief people officer by the time I was 40, and that happened around 38. And it was such an accomplishment, and I had worked so hard for it, and I just lost sight of everything else. And my job and I became one and the same.
Is 38 and the chief people officer? Wow. So, in less than a year, you lost your career, your health, and your home. Help us understand what happened there.
So I'm one of 12% of women who go through menopause before 45. So I was only 42, and this was more than 20 years ago now, Tracy. I had no typical symptoms of menopause, or at least the symptoms that are most commonly talked about. So I didn't have hot flashes. I didn't have an irregular period. I had predominantly, actually almost exclusively, cognitive decline and irritability, all cognitive symptoms that seemed much more aligned with stress, burnout, perhaps a nervous breakdown. It seemed like I was, just not able to function. So I went from high performing chief people officer, hit around 42, and all of a sudden I couldn't hold a thought together. My performance was suffering. Everything was suffering, but of course, given my identity, given how closely tied my identity was to my work, that was where it showed up most obviously for me, and where I was trying most to hold it together. And then as a result of that, the effort to try to just hold it together every day was impacting my marriage, my life, and my health was being impacted by perimenopause, but I had no words to describe that. So every doctor I went to said I was working too hard, that I was burned out. My daughter was only 5 at the time, and I was working too hard, I was burned out, I was stressed out, anxiety, depression, very consistent diagnoses, which women still get today, instead of the correct diagnosis of perimenopause. Although hopefully, Tracy, it's happening less today. There's so much more information out there for women. But back then, and it was only a few years after the WHI study when hormone therapy had been taken off the market. So even if I had been correctly diagnosed, I'm not sure that I would have been correctly treated. So as a result of that, my performance at work was really suffering, and I had a particularly pivotal moment where I messed up a presentation and I couldn't hold it together. And I was like on the floor, the hotel bathroom where I had been presenting in a conference room. And then I just couldn't come back from that. I resigned the next day because I thought, this is it. Like, I'm either going to continue to decline from a performance perspective, that I lose my job, or my credibility is getting so thin that I just need to take action. So I didn't have a plan other than that I wanted to try to save my marriage and my health and save whatever little bit of professional credibility I still had left there and have whatever little agency I had. So I resigned without a plan, and it was a big decision. It was a big job. We had lived into that lifestyle, so we had to make subsequent decisions, which was to sell our house, take our daughter out of private school. So and that was sort of the first piece, was my health, then my career. And then we sold that house. We bought a new house within that year, 9 or 10 months. And then after moving into that house we lived there only 12 days, it burned to the ground. So in 12 months, I went from sort of what you would describe as having everything to having nothing at all. But thank goodness we were all safe. So we had that. And none of us were hurt in the fire, other than emotionally impacted. But we were not physically, we were not hurt. So it was it was reckoning. So by the third reckoning, I was like, now what? At least without the job, I had the outward appearance of success. I had a beautiful home. I had my clothes. I had my things. So I didn't have the markers of success as in my professional mask that I had been wearing for 20 years, but I still had the things that one often defines them in different ways from a personal identity. And then that was gone. I mean, I didn't even own a pair of underwear. The next day that evening, I had to borrow clothes from a friend. I had nothing. I was in my pajamas. So it it was a long process to rebuild back from that.
Okay, so let's go back. That story was amazing. I was right there with you, just picturing what that must have felt like because again, I see so many parallels. I now looking back, I'm pretty sure I was in perimenopause the last portion of my career when I was going through what I was going through and I didn't understand why I was feeling what I was feeling. It wasn't until later that I read a book on it and realized I saw the symptoms again different. Like you said, it wasn't the symptoms you typically think of, and thought, I think that's why I was feeling so not like myself. I wish I had known about it. I wish my doctor had, known about this or had mentioned it because I would have had more grace with myself. Maybe I would have understood a little bit more and given myself a little bit more runway. But you just, I remember toward the end not being able to focus on these global calls. And whereas I could focus before and I could produce and could get things done, could rely on me knowing that, okay, I've got to do this, I started to get in the same place where I would find myself just not paying attention and or losing like someone would say Tracy, and it was just a very interesting thing. But for you, I think about those presentations I had to do for it to happen while you were presenting. Did you say to 300 people?
No, it was a small group of the executive team. It was probably more like
Okay.
30 people, but it was my
Okay.
peers and my boss.
Yes.
And my boss asked me a question, and it was a benign question, although he could be a bit antagonistic. He wasn't being antagonistic at that time, and I couldn't answer it. And then I couldn't, and then I, I started crying, and I ran out of the room to the hotel bathroom because it was the build up. Like it just felt like the climax of months of trying to hold it together, and
Yes.
then I just couldn't. And then when I just had to face it, I was like, okay, this is I can't I obviously can't do this job anymore. It must be stress, it must be burnout. Perhaps I'm having a nervous breakdown. I need to take a break or else my husband's going to leave me and I'm going to
Yes.
get fired, and I'm going to like I have to do something. I had to take whatever little bit of agency I had and do
Yes.
something to say, okay, I have some control over this. This is not going to control me. And the best thing I could come up with was to quit and then make the lifestyle changes to support that and give myself some space to figure out what was going on to get healthy and then ideally to go back to the C suite. But that took 7 years. It took a long time to get back.
So, Susan, when you were on that bathroom floor and you realized I can't keep the charades up, did you tell them what was really going on, or did you just say, I have to go?
I left the building, and then the next day I went to the office, and the first thing in the morning I resigned. And I didn't say much. I just said, I, I need a break. It sort of boiled it down to it was too much to even try to explain, and I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't want to name it in some way that I couldn't take back. I didn't want to say nervous breakdown. I didn't want to say I had menopause was nowhere on my radar. I had a barely 6-year-old daughter. Like
Right.
menopause happened to old people. Like
Yes.
I it was it didn't it never entered my mind. And in fact, for many years after I knew it was menopause, I still told the story as if it was two separate things. Like I had a very stressful job, I left it, and I went through early menopause. It took me 7, 8, 9 years to be like, that was
Wait a
all
minute.
one thing.
Yes.
It wasn't and your stressful job and you just happened to go through menopause, but because perimenopause in particular back then wasn't well understood or discussed, I guess, probably more so than understood. It wasn't didn't really even have a name, that transition, right? That was the transition to the rest of your life being postmenopausal, which we don't talk about either really effectively. It's like menopause is actually one day. The rest of it is the mess before and after, but we talk about it like it's all one thing. So when I eventually was like, oh, it was actually, I realized to your point, if I had known or just given myself some grace or some space or leave of absence or I had access to hormone therapy or access to even someone who could tell me, hey, this is perimenopause. Don't worry, you'll be fine. You're not going to just continue on a downward spiral. You'll come through this. But I had no answers, and I felt quite desperate to make some decision on my own and not let whatever was happening to me be my complete undoing.
Of course, it's the loneliest feeling because you feel like you are completely going through this yourself. No one else is feeling this. So, moving into your book, Paused, Redefining Identity When Our Story No Longer Holds Us, you talk about it, what it means to pause in the middle of your own story, to find the beginning of something truer. It's that moment when everything that defined you is gone. And you discover that the next chapter doesn't have to look like the last one. That is so just powerful because when you get to a certain age, you feel like you know yourself so well. You have accumulated all these things, the titles, all of these things that you're so proud of. They clearly are who you are. They define you. When you go to parties, this is who I am. When you get to that point where that identity no longer matches, it's a really odd place to be. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because with the pause, you were talking about how it's not reinvention, it's rewriting.
Yes. Yes. So, one of the reasons I love the lens of identity to tell this story through is narrative identity is foundational identity theory. And it is we write our story and then we live into it. So, we write the story that I started writing at probably 14, which is I'm going to go to college and I'm going to get a job that involves, a briefcase and a suit and a fancy office, and I'm going to make a lot of money and I'm going to have nice things. So that story I wrote for myself when I was a teenager. And then I worked really, really hard to live that story. And I did. So that who I was that story. That was my identity. And so when it started coming apart, I was like, I couldn't name that. I couldn't say that's narrative identity and I can rewrite my story. I was like, I need to go back. I need to go back. I have to get back. I have to go back. I have to get well. I have to figure out how to rebuild that life that I had. For 2 years, I was like stuck in like a liminal space trying to figure out how to get back until finally I was like, wait, there's no going back. You have to rewrite a new story. This is not a recover. This is a rebuild. This is a reconstruct. That person's gone. That house is gone. All that stuff's gone. And, that job's gone. There's no going back. So you have to go forward and recognize that the struggle is, in fact, the path, and embrace that for what it was as opposed to resist it. And that was and once I did and started trying on different selves and testing out who was I going to be in the next chapter, it became clear that it was part of my journey, was to be a more well-rounded person, not just be defined by my job, but to explore all the different ways you can, I do a lot of different things now. And during that time, I started my doctoral work and became a PhD. So I really expanded my horizons quite a lot from my narrow definition of who I was until I was in my young 40s. And so my second chapter as a CPO and my second chapter in my life and career, I was so much more well-rounded and wasn't just defined one-dimensionally by my work.
That's such a beautiful reframe, that the struggle is the path, and that you are so much more multidimensional than the original story you gave yourself when you were 14 years old. And I think when you can go through something like this and have that realization, the world opens up. Because when you're sitting at home after having to resign from this career, your baby, your everything, it can be very lonely. It can feel scary. How do I get back? But when you have that realization that, wait, there's more, I can do other things. I'm more than this one little definition, and this whole world is out there that I can choose from. I think if you can get to that place, it really opens up a whole new world of possibility. So then what made you decide to write a book?
Book came, well, first I started speaking around menopause in the workplace. So when I left corporate for the second time 3.5 years ago, and that was really my retirement at that point from the corporate world, I started speaking about the impact of menopause on the workplace and how we need to normalize the conversation. So my work started very specifically. I was like, I'll use my corporate experience, I'll use my lived experience, and I will help companies get better at this. The way we got better at normalizing mental health, the way we got better at normalizing fertility benefit. Like over my career in human resources, we normalized many different taboo conversations that might have been in the 80s when I first started. So I'm like, I'm going to help normalize the conversation. And then I realized the lens of that for that particular work was impactful, but that menopause is more than just a physiological event. It is an identity event for many of us. So it felt too narrow to just talk about it in that menopause in that regard. So that set me to think about the lens of identity. And then when you think about identity, it's like, who am I? But it's also the other two legs of this three-legged identity stool are, who am I? How did I get here? And where am I going? So if we only look at one dimension of identity, it's easy to see how we get stuck. So if the story only says, who am I? And who am I is this, high-powered C-level person with fancy clothes. How did I get here though? Like that, I didn't grow up that way. My father worked in a shipyard. My mother was a secretary when she finally went back to work. She was a stay-at-home mom. I grew up in a lower middle class, blue collar suburb of Boston. Like, how did I get there? And why was that so important to me? And then where was I going? Was that it? Was just being the next biggest chief people officer the end of the story? So looking at it from the three legs of the stool of identity just felt like a much more helpful lens for people. So that's how the book came about. So if you look at each of those questions are each answered in the book in one way or another. And when I got my PhD, I was in my 50s. So I always thought I need to put it to use in some way. So layering the theory over the story felt like a really nice way to do that. And that's what I did. And it's been pretty well received so far. It's been less than 2 months, though, since the book.
Congratulations on bringing that into the world. And so I'm curious, when you went back to corporate America and you were talking to them about perimenopause, how was that received? Was it welcomed, or was it like, oh, we don't really talk about that or have time to think about it, or it's not that important?
It's still really not talked about. So, and the irony is not lost on me. I was the chief people officer, and I didn't really consider it. Even when I went back to my second chapter as chief people officer, the demographics of the company, like it just didn't occur to me that it was ready for prime time in terms of ready to be normalized. And then when I left is when I was like, wait a second, all this social media, there's so much, like 3 years ago, right? Menopause was exploding on the social media front. Influencers, books, in our mainstream media, in your local bookstore, all over the internet. So I was like, wait, no, this might be an opportunity to see what companies are doing now that I'm away from it. And then I went back and I realized, oh God, they're really not doing anything. And so it's very mixed still. And only about less than 20% of companies in the US offer any kind of menopausal benefits. I have had quite a number of lovely conversations at companies with women's resources groups, with lunch and learns, but it's not taking off in the workplace the way it is outside of the workplace when you see it in your feed everywhere. If you're anywhere from 40 to 65. I think it's pretty much all over. So in the workplace it still has a ways to go in terms of normalization, and I feel like a lot of the work that's happening now will hopefully for the next generation it'll just be a normal part of day to day. It won't feel like it's such a big deal to go through perimenopause or menopause at work.
Hopefully, because it benefits the corporations. I don't have the stats at hand, but I know it really impacts a lot of, obviously women and their careers at a time where they're very pivotal to these companies. So it's in everyone's best interest to not have that talent be lost, or for them to feel like they have to move on, instead of being able to stay there and work through this and understand it. So it's
Yeah, the thing is, it is a business issue. 50% of your workforce is going to experience menopause. It's at some point in their career. And if it's not in your workplace, then it's at your home, your wife, your mother, your sister, your cousin. Like normalizing it feels like, it almost feels silly sometimes that we haven't normalized it yet, but I think the taboos, the ageism, the stigmas associated with it, I think are still pretty prevalent. And I wonder myself, like if you had known at the time in your career that, oh, wow, this is perimenopause, would I have said that back then? Probably not. I probably still would have been like, I'm out. I don't know. I don't know. Like if the tools, I didn't have the tools, and that's why I'm trying to help give people the tools now in one dimension of my work. But I think we still have quite a ways to go, at least here in the U.S. But we catch up. The U.K. is way ahead of us. Some of the other European countries are way ahead of us. So hopefully we'll catch up.
So if someone's listening to this right now and they're starting to kind of realize they might be in perimenopause, or they're just realizing that maybe their identity, the story that they've been living by, no longer fits, where would you suggest that they start?
Yeah, I think it depends on, so that's one of the reasons I wanted to broaden the lens, because I think your identity can rupture from lots of different things. It could be illness, it could be divorce, it could be empty nest. There's lots of career is one of them. Certainly menopause is one of them. So I think it sort of depends on if you're embracing that change or you finding that change like impossible, right? So for all those changes for me, I felt so stuck. I didn't know how to move. Like I was just stuck. And I think a lot of midlife people, not just women, but midlife people get stuck because they either, like I said, live into their job, so therefore they feel like they have no choice but to stick with that career or that high-paying salary, or they're, so attached to the idea that being married is who they have to be, or be like whatever the change might be that they have to confront. It's like, how do I actually have the tools to do that? And I feel like the identity framework gives people the tools to help unstick themselves. For me, I had to get well first, and that my journey felt a little bit wonkier because I was so stuck. But part of that was the trauma and the grief and the not having hormone therapy that was keeping me quite literally from moving. Like I was like stuck in that liminality, that hallway between one door closing and the other door opening. Like I was just stuck there. And it almost sounds silly, but acupuncture is what started me getting unstuck. It was like the trauma and the grief had to move through me so that I could access myself again. Like I had to find my self-reliance that I had developed as a young person, and I had to refine my agency. Like it was in there, but it was like overcome by trauma, by grief, by imposter syndrome at that point. Because then I thought, well, you can tell me I had menopause, fine. You could tell me it was perimenopause, but I failed. That was an epic fail. And what was I going to say? I'm just going to go out and interview for other C-suite jobs and be like, oh, I had a breakdown. Oh, no, wait, it was menopause. Oh, that's even worse. Like, what was the Like I was
Yes.
so stuck, and it was like and my health hadn't recovered yet. So I needed to find a way to unstick. And I tell people all the time, there's lots of things you can do to unstick, right? It could be meditation, it could be dancing in your kitchen, it could be getting out walking every day. Like, it might not be acupuncture that unsticks you, it might be therapy that unsticks you, it could be anything. But if you're stuck and you can't see a way, like, that old identity is gone, your kids are gone, they're off to college, your husband's gone and you're alone, someone's passed away, or you have an illness and you're stuck in that hallway and you cannot see a way forward, you have to find a way first to unstick. Like, and what is that? You have to find some tool and some support, and it could be anything. It happened to be acupuncture for me. It was like life-saving.
And what was the time frame from when you first left your career and you starting to come to these realizations and start to put some kind of understanding behind what you went through, what you were going through, and what you kind of needed to do? Was it immediate or did it take time?
No, it would have probably been sooner if the house didn't burn down. But the house burned down like in within the year, so I think that definitely prolonged it. So before I was sort of felt like I was even on any kind of path out of the darkness, it was probably close to 2 years for me, because the first year was I resigned, we pivoted, we sold the house, then we bought the new house, and then that happened. So then it kind of I got it. So mine was a bit prolonged, but it could be 2 years for folks to embrace this idea that, okay, this is not okay. The other option, right, is you can always recalibrate. Like, I could have recalibrated, and perhaps if my house didn't burn down, that might have been. I went into consulting after that. I quite enjoyed it. It's like I could have recalibrated life differently. It's just that I couldn't let go of that identity story. I knew I had to write it differently, but it was still such an important part that any job that I tried during that 7 years didn't feel like, it felt like I was not living up to that little piece of the story that still felt important. Now I went back and I did it very differently. It wasn't who I was anymore. It was just what I did. I I know you studied yoga. I went from acupuncture to yoga, and then those became sort of the pivotal parts of my healing journey until I eventually did get hormone replacement at 7 years late at 50. So I was one of those, like, finally was able to access it. And so then the combination of acupuncture, yoga, hormone replacement therapy, and then all the things I had tried during that 7 years, I was like, okay, I had the courage to go back to the C-suite in around 50.
And I guess my question for you, just hearing you just kind of recap all of that, is was this a blessing or a curse? Everything that you went through.
I think retrospectively, it was a blessing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm thinking about this. It's like in society, they tell you what success looks like, and man, you checked those boxes. You had it. And you would have had every reason to continue along that path, but because you went through this, not only are you on the other side kind of in a different place, you get to experience life in a different way, but I think about all the women that need to hear your story, that you are now speaking for them and bringing it back to corporate. The thing that made you fall apart in that moment, you are now going and speaking on behalf of other women of, here's one thing that, could be happening with. It's powerful when I hear these stories all the time from people who come on the podcast, and I can always see where, like you said, the struggle is the path. So I'm saying that because if someone's listening to this, I want them to feel that if you are struggling, if you are going through something, if there's a way that you can kind of look at your story, my story, other stories that are on this podcast,
Yes.
as what could this mean for me? What could this be? The universe is trying to shake me, awake into something else. And what might that be? And try to get a little bit excited about that.
Yes, and there's two theories in the book that I think are worth mentioning briefly without getting overly academic on you. One is called possible selves, and possible selves is like that out. It's like an outcome, or it's a piece of the narrative identity. It's like the little fragments that we try on. It's like trying on clothes in a dressing room. This fits, this doesn't, and it's, I don't know, growing up in the 60s and 70s with parents who were children of immigrants, I didn't feel like I had possibilities. I felt like it was one path and one path forward. So being able to downsize our lives so that I could try on some other possibilities and see what stuck was, that was the blessing. And I don't want anybody to think, well, that's nice. You know, she's privileged. I'm not particularly privileged. I didn't come from money. I put myself through college. I put myself through grad school. We really had to make some big changes to accommodate these possibilities. But goodness, was that worth it in the second chapter? And perhaps if I had stayed on that path, in fact, I know if I stayed on the path earlier, I would have made a lot of money. Would I have even made it to this age as healthy as I am now? I don't know, because it was
Right.
so one dimensional. And
Yes.
I didn't have time to exercise. I didn't have time to do yoga took too much time. Like it was like I worked and I, took care of my family and my house, and like so many of us, and we can't see, and my parents were didn't need care. They were getting older, but like all the things that women do. So I had this few years where I was like, I'm going to try to teach Pilates. Okay, I didn't really love that. Discard that. I liked consulting, but it wasn't the kind of impact that you could make in a really effective head of HR job. So I was like, okay, I did that for a while. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. Then it was like, I did my 200-hour yoga teacher training, and I loved that. But mostly I loved it because it gave me the philosophy of how to live and think differently. So then I started supporting a nonprofit in Boston. I did every role on that nonprofit, including being interim president and board chair, which was for marginalized inner city girls, and that stuck. So that work stuck. Then I went back to school and pursued my PhD, became a PhD, and that really stuck. And I was like, okay, now I have dimensions, right? I have a job, I have that thing that I do, but then I have yoga, I have academics, I have nonprofit work, and I just felt like such a better developed person.
And digging into your human design a little bit, it all makes sense
Does it?
because, yes, as a projector, projectors are these amazing energy types that we walk amongst, and they're all about seeing people deeply. Like you think about your aura, projectors' auras are very almost penetrating and probing. It's like projectors can see deeply into someone and make people feel very, very seen, almost instantly. And so your job as a chief, people officer, absolutely, because it's about guiding other people's energies, being able to see systems and processes, efficiencies, seeing things in others that others, can't. And then the 5-1 is very universal. It is about being on the big stages. It is about impacting others at kind of that level. But with the 5-1, you have to be careful because you can do all the things. It's a little bit of a fixer kind of archetype. And just because you can do all the things doesn't mean that you should. And a lot of people with the 5-1 profiles sometimes feel overwhelmed because people come to them and they project onto them what they need them to be. Like, Susan, you're amazing. You can do all these things. I need you to do them for me. And you have to put up almost guardrails. You have to protect that energy because, again, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. And then you also have splenic authority, which is very much so being able to make decisions that are in alignment with you in the moment. It's that intuition. It's that voice that speaks to you. It's very soft. It's a whisper. It comes once and then it goes. So you have to be very in tune with yourself and trust yourself to know when you get those hits, to trust them and to let that be your guide versus your mind, logic, or other people. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yes, it does. Particularly that last part, because I feel like that's what guided me this last 20 years. And it wasn't at all what guided me my first 20 years. My first 20 years were so performative and so checking off the boxes of that identity that I felt so committed to, that I was going to just, no matter what, I was going to achieve and continue on that path. And then I was able during that 7 years to figure out, I knew what fit and what didn't pretty quickly. Like, I didn't linger. Once I had the freedom, right? Once I had given up the big job and the big house, then I had the freedom to say, oh, well, this doesn't work. So it doesn't matter. Pilates, no Pilates. Consulting, yes. Great. Like, I could try and feel like I wasn't a failure when they didn't work, as opposed to feeling like I was putting everything into them. So, and now I over that time, I learned to trust that much more. Yes, no, even just, changing houses and changing life as our daughters launched and engaged and all the things. It's like, I trust that so much more now that I know what's right. And it's not about what I do. It's more about who I am and how I live every day much more peacefully.
Beautifully said. Is before we move on to the speed run, is there anything else that we haven't discussed today that you would love to share with our listeners?
No, I think we covered a lot, which is great. Thank you.
So I have something that I started. It's little love notes from one guest to the other. They don't know who they're leaving this love note for. It's just simply for my next guest. And yours comes from my last guest, who was Karen Richter. She's the founder of Confident by Nature. And Karen, she's a forest therapy guide who recently had a life-affirming experience walking the Camino.
And she helps. I listened to that episode.
Okay. And she helps others reconnect with themselves through nature. But she left this little love note for you. The woman you're hoping to become isn't somewhere out in the future. She's already here. Every time you choose rest instead of rushing, curiosity instead of judgment, or a walk outside instead of one more thing on your to-do list, you meet her again. Keep following what makes you feel most alive. That's your true nature calling you home. So what comes up for you when you hear that?
My God, it's so beautiful. It feels exactly where I am right now in this chapter, which is, I've been listening to your guests and I'm like, it feels like they always just hit just right. It's amazing.
You can't make this stuff up. The universe is so amazing.
Yes.
Every time it just seems to match. But what makes you come alive?
My daily vinyasa practice is still the thing that I rely on for energy, for peace, for that time with myself every day. Like, that's still my go-to.
And you said daily. That's admirable. There's nothing like going to the mat. I can't put words to what it does for you mentally, physically, spiritually, the whole thing. But what is a song that instantly shifts your energy or makes you feel something?
Brave by Sarah Bareilles.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're ready to, if you're going to do a big event or something, you have something, play that first.
Absolutely. You could pretty much put on any of her songs.
True.
And get that. She is phenomenal.
True.
Her song, She Used to Be Mine, is that correct?
I think so.
She Used to Be Mine from The Waitress.
Yeah.
That brings me to tears every single time. So a book that cracked you open or stayed with you long after the last page.
I couldn't decide, so I have to tell you two. And one will be very familiar because it's The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. And that one was years ago. But the most recent one was last year, which is The River is Waiting by Wally Lamb.
Oh.
So Wally Lamb has had some real success books that stay with you. And then there was a couple in between. But the last book he wrote, 2025, The River is Waiting, was just, I think about it all the time.
I'll have to check that out. I read another book by him, but it's been decades. But I'll definitely have to look at that.
Yeah, I can't tell you much about it because then that'll give it away.
Okay. What is your favorite little indulgence or guilty pleasure?
Dark chocolate peanut butter cups from Trader Joe's.
Yes. Yes.
My husband and I are addicted to them.
Mm. I mean, you had me at dark chocolate and then you throw peanut butter in there. It's, oh my gosh, yes. What's one thing that always reminds you how beautiful life really is?
Sunrise. We face south where we are. We live in Maine now, and it's every morning the sun comes up, and it's just a good reminder. Every day is a new day, right? It's like every day you get on your mat. Every day on your mat is different.
That's right. And we've just experienced the wildfires, and I'm in Indiana, right outside of Chicago, and for a week we've had just gray skies, and I thought I will never take a beautiful blue sky for granted again, ever.
Yeah, I feel similarly about the ocean. So like living on the coast for me is but sunrise every day because it's like, as the Buddha says, right? It's like every day is a new chance to start over.
Absolutely. And such a gift. So how can listeners stay connected with you?
I have a website, which is susanmiele.com. I'm most active on social media on LinkedIn and Substack, which is also largely susanmiele.com is my Substack. And my book, of course, is available wherever you buy a book. So those are probably the best options.
Wonderful. We'll have all that in the show notes. Well, Susan, thank you for being here. And friends, if you're wondering what's next, maybe don't start with the answer. Maybe just start with the pause. And until next time, keep getting high on life, one beautiful fix at a time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to A Beautiful Fix. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a quick review to help others find us. And if you'd like to share your own beautiful fix or join me as a guest, reach out anytime at Tracy@abeautifulfix.com. Looking forward to next time.